I finally sat down to watch the 2022 film Jeepers Creepers Reborn, and wow, it was a disaster. The movie has horrendous acting and character dialogue, a confusing and frustrating storyline, and almost too many problems to really name. In general, the movie feels like a low-budget sci-fi film from the early 2000s, and it's really a slap in the face to the original movie. To be clear, this was an attempt to reboot the Jeepers Creepers franchise. Now, I went into this movie knowing almost nothing about it. Pretty early in the movie, though, I knew it was going to be a bad one. The opening scene features an older couple being stalked by the creeper, eventually witnessing the creeper dumping a body down a pipe, similar to the original, and I think it tries to be some sort of homage to the first movie, but it's really just completely unoriginal. Now, shortly after this, we're introduced to our two main characters, Elaine and Chase. In their first scene together, the two are driving toward a horror festival in Louisiana, and pretty much right from the get-go, the acting is just horrible. The two don't seem comfortable in the roles, and their acting range tends to be pretty limited, especially Chase. Throughout the movie, there's this strange dynamic between the two, and there's really a lack of chemistry between them. Now, the storyline of this movie, it's pretty easy to follow. Lane and Chase, they're attending a horror festival in Louisiana. It's the same town where the fabled legend of the creeper resides, and Chase is really into cryptids, legends, and the supernatural, while Lane isn't really a believer. She's more of a skeptic. And the two stop at a gift shop, and there the attendant makes contact with Lane, touches her hand, and realizes that she's pregnant. Lane and Chase attend the horror festival. They win a contest, allowing them to attend some type of haunted house. Now, I'm not sure why they had to go that night. It seems a little odd that if you win a contest, you would go out in the middle of the sticks and leave a festival. But anyhow, once there, they soon come to realize that they were set up, and some of the townspeople in a cult are planning to sacrifice them to the creeper. So there's definitely quite a bit that goes wrong in this movie, and I want to come back to Lane and Chase. Specifically, Chase is planning to propose to Lane. Now, while Lane suspects she's pregnant, she hasn't said anything to Chase yet, and for some reason Chase, who's planning to propose at any time now, he begins flirting with Carrie, who's a woman on the television crew documenting their experience at this haunted house. And this is really just ridiculous. Any guy who's getting ready to propose, they're not going to be flirting right in front of the woman they're going to be proposing to. So an angered Lane, she storms off into the graveyard and is soon abducted by the creeper. Now, again, why was Chase flirting with Carrie? This makes absolutely no sense, but the writing is so bad in the movie, they can't seem to come up with any other way to isolate Lane in the graveyard and have her go off on her own. Now, once Chase catches up to Lane, he apologizes and proposes, and is he just a complete moron? What woman wants to be proposed to in a haunted graveyard? Now, I stated earlier, much of this movie just doesn't make sense. For example, the creeper in this movie is presented in a different way, really a slap to the first couple movies. The creeper gets in fistfights, so this is different than the prior films, where he was basically just presented as this badass killing machine, and your only option was to run from him. But in this movie, I mean, he's punching people, he's getting hit, and, getting into fistfights. In prior movies, the creeper also, he was a hunter, but in this film, for some reason, he's not capable of going out and hunting. And to me, this reminded me of Michael Myers in Halloween 6, and how he had that cult supporting him. So the twist the writers try and put in around this is he's got some sort of obsession with Lane. The creeper has some sort of obsession with Lane since she's pregnant, and this really doesn't make any sense too, and it feels to me like a ripoff of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, Going with a Villain Needs Help from a Pregnant Woman. Now, in addition to that, the creeper just looked horrible in this movie. The CGI didn't make him look scary. And speaking of the CGI, there was a lot of it in this movie, and it ranged from just bad to downright horrendous. Now, the ending of this movie is also absolutely ridiculous. For some reason, Lane decides to take the creeper on all by herself. Meanwhile, Chase and Stu run up the stairs and get on the roof. Their plan is to ultimately throw this weather vane on the creeper. What if the weather vane can't be detached? Just think about how ridiculous this plan sounds for a second. The creeper could simply just abduct Lane again, like he did the first time. And somehow we're supposed to go along with this mentality that they're trapping the creeper. Now, as the creeper approaches Lane, she stabs it with the weapons it uses, those boomerang type things. And then, of course, since she's all of a sudden an expert on throwing his weapon, she throws it, hits him directly in his eyes, blinding him. And then meanwhile, Stu and Chase break off the weather vane and throw it down onto the wounded creeper. The writing here is absolutely horrific. This was the best they could do. After this scene, after the creeper's wounded or impaled by the weather vane, the crows come, they kill Stu, and somehow they eat or take the creeper. And in the final scene, we see Lane's eyes turned black, signifying something. However, we, the audience, really have no clue what this really means. This is the writer's attempt at some sort of clever twist at the end, but it really fails miserably. And this is because, much like the prior film, there's no explanation or hint as to what this means. Is Lane going to turn into a creeper? Is her baby? We just simply have no idea. Now, if I had to pick one bright spot in this movie, I try and do this with even movies that I really don't like. The best part was probably around the horror festival. It wasn't that it was so great, but I thought the scenes around the Horror Hound Festival were pretty good overall. Unfortunately, though, the rest of the movie was just a hot mess, and this is really sad in a lot of ways. So one of the big things around this film, and this is more off-camera type stuff, behind the scenes, and this was around the original filmmaker, Victor Salvo. It was revealed in 2017 that he had previously been arrested in the past for pedophilia, and as a result, many people started making all these connections with his earlier films and the crimes he committed. Now, I personally don't see a lot of these connections, but when the studio released the film, they tried to somehow distance themselves from Salvo, and I understand that. That definitely does make sense, but clearly the formula just doesn't work, as you know, he was so instrumental in the first 3 films. Now, some say they just need to end the franchise after what Salvo has done, and you know, if they keep releasing movies, Salvo's going to benefit financially. People will go back and watch the prior films. Still, I think this franchise does have potential, and it's really one I'd like to see done right. I think the Creeper's a terrific villain, and hopefully, if they do this again, they can do it right. Anytime a movie has 55 minutes of a newborn baby crying, you know it's going to be almost impossible to like. And that's what we got with 2022's Abandon, a horror film starring Emma Roberts as a young mom named Sarah who's struggling with postpartum depression in her new country house. Still, while the non-stop crying was way over the top, even without it, this movie really struggled. It was dull and dragged on, with most of the movie involving Roberts, or Sarah, walking around the house hearing noises. The writers really desperately tried to produce tension, but nothing seemed to work, and I'm not really sure where they were going in this movie. If you know, definitely comment, because I am curious. I just did not follow. In sum, this movie, it was truly awful overall. The acting was fine, nothing special, but to be fair, I'm not sure any actor or actress could have made this script work. Now, there's a lot of negatives I'm going to get into in this review, but I want to point out at least one scene that I thought was good, and that was when Emma Roberts, or Sarah, got attacked in the bathtub, if you've seen the movie. To me, that was a pretty good scene as we hear the footsteps. Then all of a sudden, this old guy just violently attacks her and attempts to drown her. I gotta admit, I didn't see that coming. And overall, it was a good scene. Of course, as it ends, the baby's crying again. Now that we're over the one good scene, let's get to the bad and the ugly. First off, what is up with this creepy real estate agent in the beginning? First, she doesn't disclose the murder-suicide until Sarah, or Emma Roberts, asks. And then once she does, she has an envelope right there. I mean, what the hell? I've heard of some shady real estate practices, but I would have fired her on the spot if I was Sarah and Sarah's husband. I can't remember his name. This wasn't her only shady tactic, though, as Sarah's husband is signing the contract, which makes no sense, by the way. You don't close on a home on site like that. Anyhow, as Sarah's husband is signing, he says something kind of deep and introspective, and she's basically like, yeah, whatever, sign your life away here. I mean, okay, so let's move on. I can deal with a shady person in a movie, but one thing I can't deal with is horrific writing like this. The story was really god-awful. What was the purpose of this movie? The movie starts as a haunting and seems to go in that direction, but it never seems to establish any sort of storyline. What happens to the older guy? Why did he stop at the end? He just seems to disappear. The ending shows Sarah encounters some feral children who threaten to take her baby because they want to protect the baby. However, this doesn't really make much sense either. Weren't they the victims of the evil? Why are they trying to now hurt her baby? Also, when the children swing the hatchet and it turns to black, are the writers trying to create a twist here? I thought for a second that they died as everything was so perfect and Sarah tells her husband it's over. I thought it was kind of like they've died and they've moved on. But it appears that everything's great now. That's not the case. Sarah's pregnant again and they're happy. But still, why is she at peace? It's not explained what happened to the older guy, the murderer, whose spirit, by all accounts, is still in the house. Now, one other thing I just have to point out too is the bad communication between Sarah and her husband. I understand many married couples don't communicate well or at all, but by all means, they definitely seemed happy in this movie together. They communicated fine on so many things. It raises the question, why doesn't Sarah mention the fact she's seeing and hearing things? If that happened to me, I would definitely tell my wife. I'd be like, I saw something, I heard something. My wife would tell me too. And it's not that far of a stretch, this home being haunted, considering they know a double homicide and a suicide happened in this home. For some reason, she doesn't tell him though. She seems to just bottle it all up. Maybe that has to do with the postpartum depression or something. In sum, this movie, it struggled on many levels, seems to have no aim, and I would definitely say skip this one if you haven't seen it. If you have seen it, I'm sure you feel my pain. Thanks for watching. I've watched some bad horror movies in my time, but 2024's Night Swim has got to be somewhere at the top. The film has a horrendous story and is filled with tons of plot holes. In addition, creating a story around a haunted pool is just a bad idea in general. This is because pools aren't usually associated with paranormal or the supernatural. Graveyards, castles, old homes, historic sites, those are good settings for paranormal activity because the public associates these places with spooky activity. Modern day swimming pools don't really invoke feelings of fear. One other thing I found odd about this movie was the name of it, Night Swim. There doesn't appear to be anything different between the day and night in terms of the supernatural. In other words, paranormal activity occurs during the day and during the night, and it doesn't seem to matter. Usually movies like this are at least good enough to be entertaining. They don't require intricate plots or even good acting. When a film like this tries to do too much, it's going to fail miserably. Now, the story of this film is simple enough. It's a family of four looking for a home. The dad is a former Major League Baseball player suffering from MS, multiple sclerosis. He's having issues moving on from baseball. Soon the family is shown a home with a pool, and the dad likes the idea of rehabbing in the pool in the backyard. Soon those strange activity starts occurring around it. The two kids in the family experience it firsthand, and then eventually the dark spirit takes over the father. The family's pool, they find out early in the film, is no ordinary pool. There's a well underneath the pool that feeds water into it. The pool guy tells them the water's all natural, so they can just use it for the pool. In time, as Ray, who's the main character in this film and the dad, as he rehabs in the pool, we learn the water is somehow magical, and for some reason, it possesses people and demands sacrifice. It's not clear though why, as the movie never really explains it. The only reason we know is the mom eventually meets a woman who sacrificed her daughter to the pool so her son could be successful. Still though, we don't really get much about the origin. Most of this movie is just a hot mess, and there's several scenes that don't make any sense. One is the chicken fight in the pool. It looks like Ray gets possessed here, but earlier in the movie it implies he got possessed when he cut his hand. Later in the film, it looks like Ray gets fully possessed, but it's just tough to follow what's going on, and there's often contradicting scenes around what's happening. Speaking of the chicken fight, the dad, or Ray, tried to kill a kid at the party. How did no one else around there see it? Also, how was he not arrested on the scene? The boy had bruises from being held down by him when Ray was trying to drown him. Many of the characters seem to start with promising storylines in the movie, and then they're just forgotten. For example, the son is presented as shy and timid. Instead of showing him breaking out from his shell, the movie shows him stupidly trying to reach the shadow of his cat and falling into the pool at the end. It's really just dumb here considering he already knows the pool is haunted. So there's nothing revelation, there's no huge obstacle that any of the characters overcome. As mentioned, the story in this film, it was just really atrocious, especially for a horror movie, and it didn't give the actors much to work with. Haunted water that possesses people is just about as dumb as it gets. I get their ghost in the water too, but the writers should have just made this story about maybe a specific ghost, something simpler that haunts the pool, not just haunted water in general. That would have at least allowed for a better backstory. Still, the issue again with a haunted pool is that it's not really scary. I can't think of one time in my life I've seen a pool or heard of someone talk about a cursed pool or anything to that matter. I've heard of haunted lakes, haunted rivers, and since they go deep, you can't see what's under the water. That makes sense. We see people report paranormal activity in lakes around the US, like Lake Lanier in Georgia. So there's not much else really to say about this film, as it was just disappointing overall, and I found myself checking the clock really to see how much more of it I had to endure. There's really a lot more issues in this movie I'm leaving out, but overall the storyline is just dumb, it's just pointless, and it's really tough to watch this film. Do yourself a favor, if you haven't seen it, don't watch it. I've long felt that time travel movies are oddly suited best for the comedy genre. That said, some horror slasher movies like Happy Death Day manage to be able to combine elements of a slasher and time travel and make a pretty good movie. In 2024, the movie Time Cut was released, and while my expectations weren't exactly high for this movie, it really struggled in a number of ways. The film suffers from multiple plot holes, almost no tension at all, a lead actress who looks overwhelmed and confused for most of the movie, and also a villain who, dare I say, isn't the least bit intimidating. This movie has a ton of flaws, probably too many to mention for this review. Now, probably my biggest gripe with this movie is the storyline and the writing in of itself. Questions that we need answers to, we don't get them, while questions we don't need answers to, they're explained to us like we're a bunch of kindergartners. For example, in the movie, the question of how did this time machine in 2024 just randomly end up in a barn? It's not answered at all. Now, I suppose the explanation is that Quinn left it in there maybe, or perhaps Madison's dad, but this is never answered in the movie. Now, at the same time, there's this revolving theme around the dangers of time travel, and this is explained to us as if we're a bunch of idiots during the film. It's posed multiple times. In fact, the audience, though we know it, we've seen Back to the Future, we've seen a lot of these time travel movies, we know the dangers of it. Usually in movies like this, we can at least rely upon a good killer, some good kill scenes, but we didn't even get those in this movie. They were mostly terrible, and really there was only one halfway decent one. That was the one at the mall. Now when Emmy, who is saved on the ship, she's supposed to be the second one who gets killed, there was really an opportunity here for the writers. Lead character Madison had known when the killer was going to kill, where they were going to happen, but this altering should have allowed for a surprise attack, for lack of a better term, by the sweetly slashy killer. But the writers completely squandered this and didn't write anything else in the movie around it. Speaking of sweetly slashy, having a time-traveling Quinn end up being the killer, it was just completely confusing. Was it a surprise? I'll have to admit, sure it was, but an older Quinn as the killer doesn't add up. The writers try to justify it, that his motivation came from all this bullying that happened to him in high school, but he really doesn't even seem that upset or angry during this movie. But are we just supposed to go with that? It looks like they were just forced to kind of pick someone at the end, and this was definitely a bad choice. Now, one of the better things, or at least one positive in this movie, a good dilemma I thought the writers brought up, was the conundrum that Madison was in. If she saves her sister Summer's life, then essentially Madison is never going to be born. It's a really interesting dilemma and conflict that the movie poses, but unfortunately they just squander it like a lot of other things in this movie. They rush through the fact, they don't portray it. It doesn't unwind in a natural fashion. And at first Madison doesn't want to save her sister, but then she just kind of quickly changes her mind. It's kind of rushed through, and I think this actually happened in one afternoon in the movie. Clunkiness was definitely one of the main issues with this film in general, though. The acting was pretty subpar, and lead character Madison, who did pretty good on the Outer Banks, I thought she just looked out of place. She looks confused and overwhelmed a lot during this movie. Generally, I had the sense that it looked like she didn't want to be there a lot of times. Now, another massive weakness in this film is around the antimatter. In the movie, two high school students, Madison and Quinn, they break into the facility around where the antimatter is held. Now, I can assure you that facilities that hold antimatter, just because you have someone else's badge, you're not going to be able to go in. Those things are top secret, and there's simply no way that two high school kids, or really anyone, even professionals, would be able to break into a facility like that. That's like trying to say you'd be able to break into something like Fort Knox. So essentially, Madison and Quinn are able to go in, get a canister of the antimatter, break out, and it's also a little bit ridiculous too that they're able to reverse engineer the time machine and discover that that's what they need. But again, they needed that to make the movie work. And that was kind of a theme overall. A lot of the writing was choppy, and it felt like times they rushed certain things. And then at other times, they didn't cover things well enough. So the movie did not flow very well. It felt like a lot of the writing was forced overall. And I would just say I didn't think this was a very good movie, even though I didn't have the best expectations for it. Just recently, I sat down and watched the 2023 film Founders Day. Founders Day is a horror movie, a slasher film, and really feels like a mixture of Scream and Thanksgiving. It has a predictable and unsatisfying ending, yet I found myself strangely entertained while watching the movie. It follows a decent enough storyline, yet it's unoriginal, stealing ideas already done many times in other slasher movies. The movie plot is as follows. It's set in a small town. A serial killer or killers are on the loose, and the movie's set against the backdrop of this heated mayoral race. The storyline unfolds, and it keeps audiences guessing who the killer is, much like Scream, and then at the end, we get the big surprise, the big reveal, and it's really not that surprising or not that shocking or well done. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, there's going to be spoilers ahead in this review. In general, I thought the film had many flaws, yet strangely I found myself engaged and entertained enough, curious as to who the killer was. Although there were several things that didn't really add up in the movie, I did find myself tempted to turn off the movie and just go read the Wikipedia page to find out who the killer was. So I'm going to call out the positives and the negatives for this film. I'm going to start with the positives, and probably the best aspect of this movie is that I did find it suspenseful. It keeps you engaged and curious as to who the killer was. There's certainly a few valid suspects, and the movie didn't completely telegraph who it was going to be, albeit it wasn't super shocking anyways. I would have liked to see more around the motivations. It was kind of thin in that area. Another positive thing around this film was the cinematography. I thought it was good. The shots were well done, and it captured many of the kill scenes with really just enough of the right gore. Now, the cinematography, it wasn't groundbreaking by any means, but it was surely above average, and it really helped the movie out. Now, other things I liked about the movie were the sound, the character dialogue, and the storyline was good enough, although it's surely not on par with slashers like Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer. All this said, the movie had several flaws that really kept it from being better. The first weakness was the ending, or the big reveal, and this was that Lily, along with several others, were behind the murders. Now, I'll get to the others in just a second, but having Lily be the primary murderer, it wasn't really a huge surprise. Early on in the film, we never saw her body when supposedly she was killed and dumped off the bridge. So it seemed likely that she was going to be one of the killers and one other person. Now, in addition to this, her motivation to kill seems really far-fetched, even for a movie like this. Not to mention, her acting is really bad when it gets down to that final scene and she tries to play the psycho. She's no Stu. She's not coming across as someone that really looks like it, the part. So the motivation's lacking, and are we really supposed to believe a girl goes psychotic and kills all these people, including her dad, because her summer love interest might be leaving her? It just doesn't add up, in my opinion. Now, one of the things we've seen since the original Scream in 1996 is the introduction of multiple killers. Now, while it was groundbreaking when Scream did it, this movie takes it too far, too extreme. In the movie, there are essentially 4 to 5 people in on the killings. All are really not connected by anything other than they just know each other in the town. And there's really no explanation of several of them of what their motives are. Lily, we get at least some sort of explanation, but it appears weak. So as far as the other killers, there's the teacher who masterminds the events. I'm guessing he did this so he could become mayor. I didn't realize small town mayor was that prestigious. Also, there's a deputy sheriff and a mayor's assistant that go along with the plan too, although it really doesn't make much sense. By all accounts, the mayor's assistant is still in the same place career-wise, and I assume the deputy sheriff, maybe he becomes sheriff since the sheriff was killed, but are we supposed to believe these two murdered so that they could get these meager promotions? Also, there's Adam, who I'll get to in just a sec. Now, one other big flaw in the movie too has to do with the mayoral race. Simply stated, the movie really overblows the importance of this job and the prestige of it. It's definitely an important job, I get it, but the movie seems to imply these politicians are as narcissistic and corrupt as politicians in the District of Columbia. For example, both mayoral candidates lose a child in the film, and seemingly for the most part don't seem that unfazed. They press on with their campaigns as they have to get that mayoral job at all cost. I'm not buying this though. It's not realistic, as if your kids are murdered, the fact is these candidates would probably drop out of this race. Now, one other flaw in the movie I thought was the casting of Devin Droid as Adam. Now, he plays that shy high schooler well, don't get me wrong, I think he's a fine actor, but I just think he's too old now. He's been playing the high school kid for so long. In 2016, he played a high schooler in Imperium, and he also played one in 13 Reasons Why. Now, in this movie, he was the best actor, I thought, but he just looks way older than his peers. In the final scene, we see Allison Chambers giving a speech, as well as a teacher giving one on Founders Day as the teacher gets away with the murders. Allison essentially was basically bribed into letting the teacher orchestrate all the murders. I'm not sure why her dad allowed all this. Maybe being unconscious, he really never figured it out. And there might be some other theme or message in this movie, but it seems to me like the message from it is just don't trust anyone, with 4 to 5 different killers.